his own skin. This deep-seated insecurity, this desperate yearning for acceptance, would become the ghost that haunted his entire life. It was the fuel for a ferocious ambition, a need to prove to the world and to himself that he was somebody. As a teenager, he found his escape not in books or studies, but in movement. He was drawn to the nascent hip-hop and breakdancing culture coming over from America. It was expressive, it was physical, it was cool. He became a gifted dancer, his tall, athletic frame perfect for the spins and pops of the art form. He also dabbled in modeling, his striking, chiseled features and exotic look making him a natural in front of the camera. He was crafting an identity built on aesthetics, on the visual. He was learning how to perform. In 1984, in a Munich nightclub, fate intervened. He met Fabrice Morvan, or Fab. Fab was another transplant, a young man from Paris with a similar passion for dance and a shared ambition. They were reflections of each other, handsome, stylish, hungry for a way out of their ordinary lives and into the spotlight. They clicked instantly, forming a deep and immediate bond. They were brothers in ambition. They started as a duo, dancing in clubs, backing other artists, and even trying to form their own group, but success was elusive. They were broke, often sharing a single sandwich for a meal, but they had a shared dream that kept them going. They wanted to be stars, and they knew they had the look. Their big break came in 1988 when they caught the eye of the legendary and infamous German record producer, Frank Farian. Farian was pop music royalty in Europe, a Svengali-like figure who knew how to craft a hit. He had a new project in the works, a collection of slick, catchy pop R&B tracks. He had the songs, he had the sound, but he was missing one crucial ingredient, the face. The original singers, a group of middle-aged American session musicians including Charles Shaw, John Davis, and Brad Howell, were vocally brilliant. But in Farian's brutally honest commercial assessment, they didn't have the look for the MTV generation. When Farian saw Rob and Fab, he saw pure gold. They were the total package, young, gorgeous, charismatic, and they could dance like tomorrow wasn't coming. He invited them to his studio and made them an offer. It was a classic deal with the devil, though it probably didn't seem so at the time. He played them a demo of a song called Girl, You Know It's True. It was infectious, an instant earworm. Farian's proposition was simple. You be the face, you be the performers, and I will make you superstars. You just won't be the singers. For two young men who had been scraping by for years, who were desperate for a break, the temptation was overwhelming. They were offered a significant cash advance, the promise of fame, fortune, and everything they had ever dreamed of. But they hesitated. Both Rob and Fab were aspiring singers, and the idea of lip-syncing, of building a career on a lie, felt wrong. Rob, in particular, was torn. He had a deep desire to be a genuine artist, to be respected for his talent. Yet, the allure of the prize Farian was dangling was too powerful to resist. They convinced themselves it would be a temporary arrangement, a stepping stone. They would do this one album, get their foot in the door, and then Farian would let them sing on the next record. Trusting his promise, they signed the contract. They sealed their fate. The rise was meteoric, almost terrifyingly fast. Girl, You Know It's True became a colossal hit across Europe. The music video was a masterclass in late 80s style. Rob and Fab, in their iconic padded shoulder jackets and biker shorts, dancing against a minimalist background, were instantly iconic. Arista Records, helmed by the legendary Clive Davis in the U.S., saw the potential and signed them for an American release. The machine was now in full motion. In America, their debut album, also titled Girl, You Know It's True, was an absolute juggernaut. It spawned an incredible 5 top 5 singles, including 3 number 1 hits, Baby Don't Forget My Number, Blame It on the Rain, and the title track. They were everywhere. Their posters adorned teenage bedroom walls from Los Angeles to London. They were mobbed by screaming fans, appeared on every major talk show, and lived a life of unimaginable luxury. For Rob, it must have felt like the ultimate vindication. The lonely boy from the orphanage, the kid who was mocked and spat on, was now one of the most famous people on the planet. He was loved. He was adored. He was finally somebody. But underneath the glamour, the lie was a corrosive poison. Rob and Fab were living in a golden cage. They were puppets, dancing on strings pulled by Frank Farian from his German studio. They weren't just a band, they were a phenomenon. Their faces were plastered on every magazine cover, their videos were in constant rotation on MTV, and their music was the inescapable soundtrack of 1989. They sold over 30 million singles, 10 million albums, and they even clutched that coveted golden gramophone, a Grammy for Best New Artist. They had reached the absolute zenith, the peak of the pop music mountain where the air is thin and the view is endless. But what no one knew, what was hidden behind the million-dollar smiles and the perfectly choreographed moves, was a secret so simple yet so devastating that its revelation wouldn't just end a career, it would dismantle a legacy, trigger a global scandal, and ultimately claim the life of the man who seemed to have it all. This is the story of Rob Pilatus, a man who flew so close to the sun that he forgot his wings weren't his own. It's a story about what happens when the music stops, the applause fades, and all you're left with is the truth. To understand the explosion of Milli Vanilli, you have to transport yourself back to the late 1980s. It was a different world. The Cold War was thawing, the Berlin Wall was about to crumble, and pop culture was a spectacle of glorious excess. Music wasn't just about sound, it was about the look. This was the golden age of MTV, a 24-hour television channel that had transformed musicians into visual idols. A catchy song was good, but a catchy song paired with a stunning music video featuring charismatic, camera-ready stars, that was a ticket to global domination. The sound of the era was polished, synthesized, and infectious. Producers like Stock Aitken Waterman in the UK were creating pop factories, churning out hit after hit with a signature danceable sound. In Germany, a producer named Frank Farian had already mastered this formula. He was the shadowy genius behind the 70s disco sensation Boney M., a group that also featured captivating performers fronting vocals recorded by others. Farian understood the market better than anyone. Audiences didn't just want to hear a song, they wanted to see it. They wanted a fantasy, a package they could fall in love with. Image was becoming paramount, sometimes even more so than the music itself. Into this world of manufactured perfection, two young, hungry, and impossibly good-looking dancers were about to step. Unaware, they were walking into the best and worst dream of their lives. Robert Pilatus was born on June 8, 1965, in New York City. His father was a Black American soldier, and his mother a white German entertainer. This was his origin, but not his home. He never knew them. Within months, baby Rob found himself in a Bavarian orphanage, a biracial child in a predominantly white post-war Germany. It was a lonely start, a life that began with a profound sense of dislocation. At the age of 4, he and his sister Carmen were adopted by a kind middle-class couple from Munich, the Pilatus family. They gave him a home, a name, and stability, but they couldn't erase the deep questioning void within him. Growing up, Rob was acutely aware of his otherness. He was the tall black kid in a German world, a constant target for racist taunts and a feeling of not quite belonging anywhere. In a later heart-wrenching interview, he recalled the pain of his childhood, saying, "I had a very deep voice, and the kids in my school used to call me Kunta Kinte. They would spit on me." This wasn't just schoolyard bullying. It was a daily chipping away at his identity. He felt like an outsider in his own home. The pressure was immense. Every interview, every public appearance was a tightrope walk. They had to perpetuate the myth that they were the voices on the records. Rob, being the more outspoken and impulsive of the two, began to show the cracks first. He developed a reputation for being arrogant and boastful in the interviews. In a now infamous moment, he gave an interview to Time magazine where he audaciously claimed, "Musically, we are more talented than any Bob Dylan. Musically, we are more talented than Paul McCartney." The comment was met with widespread ridicule. It was seen as the height of pop star hubris, but in hindsight, it can be read differently. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a desperate, misguided cry for legitimacy. He was so deeply insecure about not being the real singer that he overcompensated, trying to convince the world and perhaps himself of his artistic worth. He was acting out the part of a superstar with a bravado that masked a profound fragility. Fab Morvan later reflected on this, saying Rob was a very sensitive person and that the pressure of the lie was eating him alive. He wanted to be a real artist so badly that he started to believe his own hype, or at least tried to project it with all his might. The facade was beginning to crumble. The whispers in the industry were growing louder. The first very public crack in the armor appeared on July 21, 1989, during a live performance for MTV at the Lake Compounce theme park in Bristol, Connecticut. In the middle of their performance of "Girl, You Know It's True," the backing track began to skip. The line, "Girl, you know it's," repeated over and over and over like a broken record. For a terrifying 15 seconds, the illusion shattered. Rob and Fab froze on stage, their faces a mask of panic, before Rob, in a moment of sheer desperation, bolted from the stage. The audience, caught up in the energy of the show, didn't seem to notice or care much. They cheered, thinking it was just a technical glitch. But for Rob and Fab, it was a horrifying glimpse of the abyss. The lie had been exposed, if only for a moment, in front of a national television audience. The incident was a chilling omen of what was to come. Despite these warning signs, their star continued to ascend. On February 21, 1990, they reached the pinnacle of music industry recognition. They won the Grammy Award for Best New Artist. Standing on that stage, holding those golden statues, they were officially validated by the very system they were deceiving. It should have been their greatest triumph, but it was a moment laced with bitter irony. They had won the industry's most prestigious award for work that was not their own. Rob later confessed that holding the Grammy felt like a cold weight in his hands. The symbol of ultimate success was, for him, a symbol of their ultimate fraud. The lie had become too big. They were drowning in it. Empowered by the Grammy win, Rob and Fab decided they could no longer live the lie. They went to Frank Farian and issued an ultimatum: let us sing on the next album for real, or we're done. They wanted to be genuine artists. They believed their global fame gave them the leverage to renegotiate their devil's bargain. They completely misjudged the man they were dealing with. Frank Farian was not an artist. He was a businessman. He had built an empire on a specific product, and he wasn't about to let his performers change the formula. He saw their demand not as an artistic plea, but as a threat to his business model, and he decided to get ahead of the story. On November 14, 1990, in a move that sent shock waves through the entire global entertainment industry, Frank Farian called a press conference. He, not Rob or Fab, dropped the bombshell. He told the world that the duo did not sing a single note on their album. He preempted them, controlled the narrative, and threw them under the bus in spectacular fashion. He portrayed them as greedy upstarts who had gotten too big for their boots, conveniently omitting his own role as the architect of the entire deception. The fallout was immediate and brutal. It was more than just a scandal. It was a cultural reckoning. The public, which had so adored them just days before, felt betrayed, duped, and foolish. The backlash was vitriolic. They went from heroes to zeros overnight. The word Milli Vanilli became a punchline, a shorthand for any kind of fraud or fake. They were the subjects of relentless mockery on late-night television, in newspapers, and in everyday conversation. 4 days after Farian's confession, the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences did something unprecedented in its history. They revoked Milli Vanilli's Grammy Award. The shame was now official, cemented in the annals of music history. Clive Davis and Arista Records quickly deleted the album and master tapes from their catalog, effectively erasing them from existence. Rob and Fab, desperate to reclaim some shred of dignity, held their own press conference in Los Angeles. It was a media circus. In a surreal, almost pathetic spectacle, they stood before a horde of over 100 journalists, returned their Grammy Awards, and, to prove they had some vocal talent, they began to sing and rap a cappella. The performance was shaky, off-key, and deeply uncomfortable. It did nothing to win back public sympathy. Instead, it just confirmed what everyone now believed. They were imposters. One journalist cruelly asked, "If you guys were in a 7-Eleven that was being robbed and the clerk was shot, would you be good witnesses? I mean, could you describe what the gunman was wearing?" The room erupted in laughter. It was a public crucifixion. The aftermath of the scandal was a long, painful spiral downwards, especially for Rob. While both men were devastated, Fabrice Morvan, with a seemingly more stable support system and inner resilience, eventually managed to find his footing, working as a session musician, DJ, and radio host. But Rob Pilatus was completely untethered. His entire identity, the superstar persona he had so desperately craved and built, had been obliterated. The fame he thought would heal the wounds of his childhood had only inflicted deeper ones. He fell headfirst into a life of addiction, using cocaine and other drugs to numb the pain and humiliation. The fortune they had amassed quickly dwindled away. In 1991, they tried to stage a comeback with an album ironically titled The Moment of Truth, which they promoted under the name Rob and Fab. On this album, they finally used their own voices, but the public wasn't interested in the truth anymore. The album flopped, selling only a couple of thousand copies. The world had moved on. They were a joke, and no one wanted to listen to the punchline sing. Rob's life became a tragic series of police blotter headlines. His addiction worsened, leading to a string of desperate and sometimes bizarre crimes. In 1996, his downward spiral hit a devastating low. He was arrested in Los Angeles multiple times, once for vandalizing a car, another time for trying to break into a vehicle, and a third time for assaulting a man who tried to stop him from robbing someone. He was clearly a man in crisis. He served time in jail in California, a stark and brutal contrast to the luxury suites and private jets of his recent past. In a moment of profound despair, he even attempted suicide while in custody. He confessed to a reporter from his jail cell, "I'm the biggest joke in the whole music industry. They say, there's that guy Rob Pilatus. He's the guy that screwed up. He's the fake." His self-loathing was palpable. The shame was a physical weight he carried every day. He felt utterly and completely alone. There was, however, one last glimmer of hope. Frank Farian, the man who had both created and destroyed him, felt a pang of guilt, or perhaps saw a final business opportunity. He reached out to Rob and Fab with a proposal for a new Milli Vanilli comeback album, this time with them singing for real, backed by the original session vocalists. Farian paid for Rob's rehabilitation in Germany and flew him back to begin work on the album titled Back and in Attack. For a brief moment, it seemed like there might be a chance at redemption, a third act to this tragic story. Fab Morvan was hesitant but agreed, largely to help his friend Rob, who he could see was struggling immensely. But the demons that haunted Rob were too powerful. He couldn't outrun his past or his addiction. The years of public ridicule, the shame, and the deep-seated insecurities from his childhood had taken their toll. The comeback album was never completed. On the evening of April 2nd, 1998, on the eve of a promotional tour for the new album that would never happen, Rob Pilatus was found dead in a cheap hotel room in Frankfurt, Germany. He was alone. The cause of death was an overdose of a toxic mixture of alcohol and prescription pills. The coroner ruled it accidental, but for many who knew his story, the line between accidental and a final desperate act of surrender was tragically blurred. He was only 32 years old. The story of Rob Pilatus and Milli Vanilli is more than just a footnote in pop music history about a lip-syncing scandal. It has become a cautionary tale that resonates deeply, even today. It forced a critical conversation about authenticity in an industry that often prioritizes image over substance. After the scandal, the use of uncredited session singers and the manufacturing of pop acts came under far greater scrutiny. The Grammy Awards even changed their rules and procedures. In a way, Milli Vanilli's fall was a necessary sacrifice that exposed the inner workings of the pop machine. It made audiences more cynical, perhaps, but also more savvy. But the real significance of this story isn't about industry practices. It's about the profound human cost of a lie. Rob Pilatus wasn't a master criminal or a malicious con artist. He was a deeply flawed and wounded individual, a young man who craved acceptance so desperately that he made a fateful compromise. He was a victim, not just of Frank Farian's exploitation, but of his own insecurities and the seductive, brutal nature of fame itself. Fab Morvan has spent decades trying to process the tragedy and reclaim his own narrative. In a 2018 interview, his pain was still raw when he spoke of Rob. He said, people might say, well, you guys were fools, you signed a contract. But we were not fools. We were two young kids hungry for success. And when you're hungry, you do things that you normally wouldn't do. He spoke of Rob's death with a profound sense of loss, seeing him as a brother lost to a system that built him up only to tear him down with unimaginable cruelty. The tragedy is that Rob never got the chance to find peace, to redefine himself outside the shadow of Milli Vanilli. He remained trapped by the ghost of his former fame until the very end. So what do we take away from the life and death of Rob Pilatus? It's a story that serves as a powerful, heartbreaking reminder of the fragility of the human spirit. We live in an age of social media, of carefully curated online personas, where the line between the real self and the projected image is more blurred than ever. We all, in small ways, present a version of ourselves to the world that we want to be accepted.